Welcome back to Tawana Talks, where I believe leadership is a dance everyone's invited to, even you with two left feet. Each week is a new track where we are chatting about the moves you make to lead yourself and others to success. So lace up those dancing shoes and let's dive into creating those supportive steps together. Ready to move with purpose? Let's hit the dance floor. Hey, and welcome to Tawana Talks. I'm Tawana, founder and CEO of TL Collaborative Coaching and Consulting, where my mission and focus is on nurturing leaders for lasting success. And these talks are to facilitate and generate conversation that allows others to see or hear themselves in a situation or in a person. That gives them a tool and a nugget for them to be able to thrive in their area of leadership. Um, so this talk is fueled by a thought. I was thinking about and reminiscing on my childhood and just thinking about some things from my childhood. But before I even thought of that, what actually sparked me into thinking about my childhood is smiling, right? Um, I don't know if many people walk around with a smile on their face. Like, if you're looking at me, I'm just grinning from ear to ear. And I personally, for me, I don't know if people, and I've kind of just started people watching for this, but for me, it kind of feels, if I'm just smiling without a purpose, it feels inauthentic to me. Um, and I'm not saying that it is inauthentic if you are smiling and don't have a reason, because maybe you do have a reason. Your reason may just be because you want to smile. But I've been told on various different occasions by um, non connected individuals, um, or asked, why don't you smile often? And I was thinking, like, I do smile. Um, and they're talking about situations where I am not talking, I'm not interacting, I may just be standing in a place or doing nothing and I'm not smiling. And I'm like, what? Should I be standing there with a smile on my face for no, I don't know. Like, I'm not frowning. I'm not unintentionally or intentionally not smiling. Um, and so that got me to thinking, because even my own child will be like, when we're driving in the car, we're doing nothing, she'll say something like, "Are you okay?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm fine." And she's like, "Well, it looks like you're about to cry." And I'm like, "Really?" Like, what is on my mind that is giving vibes of me not being happy or not smiling or content in the moment? And so I was having a conversation with another childhood friend, and they also said, I remember when you were younger, like you would kind of look like you were about to cry. And I'm like, whoa, this has the second time somebody has said this. And these are people who are not in any way, shape, or form connected or have interacted in spaces to have collaborated that phrase. And so I'm like, it got me thinking, like, what, how am I showing up? For people to interpret that, like, what is my face looking like? And do I need to investigate where I am being more intentional about my face and my expression on what people are seeing? And so I started watching people, like, is people smiling? What do people look like when they're walking by? And that may also contribute to my face looking confusing and mean, because I'm busy watching other people and seeing what their face looks like. But anywho, as I started thinking about that, going from being an adult and hearing it, and then hearing someone from my childhood say it from my childhood, I started thinking, like, where did that come from? Is there something deeper into me not smiling and showing up like that? And so that thought process, and I don't think this, me not smiling, or not thinking about not smiling, is the overarching thought for this talk. But I wanted to take you on a journey and help you to see why I started thinking about this, and then how I led to where I am now and what I'm talking about. Um, and so I remember, I had to be about 9, 10, or 11, somewhere between the range of 9 and 11. I remember, so I grew up in the inner city of Buffalo, New York. And I remember going to the store one day, the corner store, and going into the store, there was a young lady who was either coming out of the store or going in the store. And I had to think back on her name because it was a very common name and not anything like hard to remember, but I had to think on it. And her name was Linda. Now, I didn't know Linda personally, and I don't think Linda knew me personally. Well, Linda did not know me personally, but just to give you some context, Linda was a known drug addict in the neighborhood. And so that's how people knew her name because of that context. And I grew up in the 80s where it was the crack epidemic and that era. And so, people knew people because of um, their habits or things that they indulged in. And so I knew Linda's name from that. And Linda was a beautiful brown skinned woman with very short hair, and she was very tall. If I'm remembering correctly, as I'm telling the story, I think she used to be a model in her younger years or a stint of time of her in her life. And I remember her distinctly saying, as we were passing each other's way at the store, she said, "You have a beautiful smile." And that stuck with me. And like I said, I had to be between 9 and 11. And whenever somebody would say to me, like, "Why aren't you smiling?" or "You should smile more," I think and I thought about Linda, how she would say, "I have a beautiful smile." And I remember actually too, when she said it, I remember sometime after that, maybe been the same day or a couple of days after, me looking in the mirror and just kind of investigating my smile because you don't often see yourself smile, right? Remember during this time, there were no cell phones, so there were no selfies. There was if you got a picture taken of you, you had to wait for it to get sent to Walgreens or nope, sorry, not Walgreens, Rite Aid, and then you had to wait for it to develop. You had to wait for someone to pick up the film, and then you got to see it. So by the time you got to see your smile taken in that picture, a couple of weeks would have passed, right, for you to reflect and adjust. So I had to look in the mirror. And I remember looking in the mirror and just kind of investigating my smile to see if I saw what she saw in me. Um, and so as an adult, this conversation came up with regards to smiling, and it made me think about Linda. And it took me a moment to remember her name and take me back to that moment when she said that. And that got me thinking, like, first of all, a person who is not often seen in the light that she saw me in, but is seen in a way that is unfavorable because um, of her habit or lifestyle that she picked up. So the unseen seeing, I felt seen. And it's ironic that I felt seen by the unseen, meaning someone that's not seen at that time in her beauty. She still found it to see something in my beauty. And that had me a little bit teary eyed when I thought about it in the moments as an adult. Like that had so much to unpack. Someone who is currently in a predicament of life where not being seen in value still was able to pull something out of herself to see something else in someone else in value. And it just took that one little phrase, "You have a beautiful smile." And that was the only time I can ever remember interacting with Linda. But that time stuck with me. And I'm not sure if she ever knew how impactful that was. I believe Linda passed away during my childhood. Um, but that was very impactful. So that got me thinking about how we show up in spaces for people. And people will rise or fall to the occasion that you place them or where you place them. So when you lift people up, they will rise to the area of where you're lifting them. But if you tear them down, they will fall to the place that you're tearing them down to. And I think about that in my experience in leadership in areas where I felt support, in areas where I didn't. There was a stint in my leadership where I felt very confident in what I was doing and celebrated and was supported. So I operated in that support and confidence. And when there were things that were asked of me or things that were required of me, I rose to that occasion because of the support that I had and the empowerment that I had allowed me to do things that I didn't think that I could ever do. in my leadership, in my ability, and I was able to look back and say, wow, I did that. I can't believe that I did that. I think about um, when I was in the classroom and I was teaching, and that was a form of leadership because I'm leading a generation of students, how my innovative thought process developed a system that allowed me to do asynchronous learning, thinking about how do I reach and teach students when they're not in class. I don't have the time to do it, um, to make it up during the school day. And so I started recording my lessons in real time as I was teaching them to the class, and then refining them and posting them on YouTube. Well, before YouTube, I was doing like on Microsoft, and a lot of people couldn't reach it, or you had to have certain technology. Now, this was well before YouTube was the thing. So it felt weird to say, um, can everybody access YouTube? Right? Because it wasn't the thing. And that makes me feel old, but I realize YouTube is actually really young. So there you have it. But then I started putting these lessons on my lessons on YouTube so that everyone could access them if you were absent from school. And then it has been accessible to, other students around the world, where my students, as they matriculated in grades, they started sharing them with their friends to help them, and then asking their teachers if they can use them for assisting them in lessons and things of that nature. But I was able to do that because of the support and empowerment that I had from my leaders, my community, and even my students and parents, that allowed me to rise to a level of production because of the support. I've also experienced in my leadership where I was torn down, and I actually lowered myself to that level of where I was torn down. I was felt that I was made to feel that I was inadequate, made to feel that I did not have what it took. And so I started to feel that way. I started to develop imposter syndrome, and I didn't even know what that was. And then I started to develop in thinking things like, do my degrees matter? Does my work matter? Am I really smart? Am I really innovative? Am I really creative? I started to question those things because of the tearing down of what was happening in that certain situation, and not identifying that as maybe being a threat to others who were not thinking in that space, and how could we support one another so that we all can feel empowered and work together to create something monumental. Instead, it went a different way. And so I say all this to say that it is important to understand that our words matter. Um, the power of life and death is in the tongue. Seriously, like, you never know what you can say to someone and how that something is going to impact their life. Like I said, Linda probably has no idea that that simple phrase has been a major impact in my life, and a reflection of how I try to show up. Now, am I smiling all of the time? No, obviously not, because that's what I'm told. I'm trying now. But I think about that every time someone says something. I remember she told me I had a beautiful smile. And the other point with that is, um, sometimes I think that we don't give honor where honor is due, or we don't empower others, or we don't encourage others, because sometimes we think our voice doesn't matter, or maybe um, we're not the person to say it, or our impact may not be there because we are not, I don't know, that person. And a kind word goes a long way, even from a stranger. And so, like I said, Linda, we didn't have a relationship. She wasn't part of my family. Um, she was just the person I knew in the neighborhood, and I'm sure she didn't even know my name. Um, but her words went a long way. And so I encourage, those that are listening, to think about the things that you say and think about the things that you do. I was having a conversation with a colleague friend who operates and runs a business, and I was I was coaching and developing in this space, in this area, to discuss how you view people can show up in how you treat people, which then shows up in how they produce. Because again, if you lift them, people will rise to that occasion, but if you tear them down, they will lower or sink to that occasion. And so if you're operating in a mind space of in people are invaluable, then they feel that treatment. If you operate in a mind space that people are disposable, then they start to behave in a way that makes them disposable. Um, and then that's devaluing. Um, and that's just so important in just being intentional with how we're showing up with people. I was having a conversation with someone else and we were talking about strategy and why that's important in business, but that's just important in life when you're strategizing how you are showing up in spaces, when you're strategizing your relationships. And if you think about parenting, if you think about businesses, if you think about whatever it is that you're doing, the strategy helps you to create the pathway and the destination that you're trying to reach. And so once you have the destination in mind, the pathway, then you start to order your steps in that. What are the things that you need to do in reaching that goal? And those doing also evolves around relationships and how you show up in spaces and treating people in relationships, and then also setting boundaries on how you will allow yourself to be treated, and not even flipping on the flip side, not falling to the destination of how people are maybe tearing you down, but recognizing spaces and areas and setting boundaries so that you can be in spaces where you are empowered and uplifted to rise to the occasion. And as you are moving along that space, when you recognize that it's a space where you're being torn down, you have strategized to understand what that looks like so that you can be able to pivot um, in those spaces. So I just leave you with this. It's really important to just understand that people will rise to the place of where you're uplifting them, but people will also fall to the place to where you're pulling down. So develop strategy and understanding on how you are going to interact and engage with people to create a space where individuals around you and that you can thrive.